Good morning. My name is Karen Freeman Wilson, and I'm the president and CEO of the Chicago Urban League. I am excited to welcome you on behalf of the Equity and Justice in Action Compact, a collaboration between the Chicago Urban League and Oregon Organic Urban Revitalization, also known as OURS, that promotes economic equity in the cannabis industry. As we find ourselves coming to a close in Women's History Month, we thought it would be powerful to talk to women in the vanguard in the cannabis industry. And, I have to admit, I've been doing a lot of things for over 40-ish years, but I can't remember a time when I've been as honored and as excited to bring a group of women together. And so we're going to jump right into this. When you think of the word boss, whether you're thinking of a boss in or out of the cannabis industry, you have to think about Wanda James. When you think of the word trailblazer, you have to think of Wanda James. Wanda James was one of the first individuals, was the first African-American, along with her husband, Scott Durrah, to own a dispensary in Denver, Colorado. But she hasn't just stopped there. As the CEO of Simply Pure, she has used her platform not only to create a business opportunity for herself and her family, but she has used it to create opportunities and to open doors for Blacks in the cannabis industry, for women in the cannabis industry. And we are excited to talk to her today, and then to talk to a phenomenal panel of women. And I will introduce our panelists later. But Ms. James, let's jump right in. Would you talk about your journey a bit? How did you get to the cannabis industry?
Ooh, well, thank you for all of that. And I would be remiss if I said that this isn't somewhat overwhelming sometimes, right? When you hear people say things like that about you, because nobody ever tries to be the first, because you can't try to be the first, right? You do what you do, and then somewhere along the line, a reporter says, "Were you the first?" And then they start digging, and then you find out that happened. A lot of that is, opportunity is, or luck is when opportunity meets preparedness, right? And we, in 2009, coming off of Barack Obama's National Finance Committee, we knew that they were going to allow the states to legalize. For us, we've been serial entrepreneurs forever, so this step into the entrepreneurial piece to it made sense. However, the motivation for doing this was mass incarceration. When you have family members that were incarcerated, when you have family members that picked cotton to purchase their freedom because they were busted with small amounts of pot. I mean, more pot than I have in my purse, less pot than I have in my purse right now. So when we started to see that my brother's story was horrific, but what made it even more horrific is when you find out, or when it was told to me, that story happens 800,000 times a year before legalization. Mostly Black and brown boys between the ages of 17 to 24 were targeted for slave labor in America. You all know the story. The 13th Amendment allows for slavery, and cannabis, unfortunately, has allowed for the most slavery, because we know that if we arrest young Black men, and now Black women as well too, or brown men and women. There's no detoxing for them. We don't have to put them in medical facilities. We can arrest those great big, young, strong slaves and put them to work picking cotton right now, fighting fires in California, making artisanal cheese for Whole Foods Market. I mean, you can do, and they were doing this for $1 a day or 30 cents an hour, which is effectively slave labor. So that was our motivation for wanting to put a Black face on the cannabis industry. Now, this was 11 years ago, right? And 11 years ago, and people think that the Colorado story was this kumbaya thing that we all grabbed hands and decided to legalize and start making money, and that's how it all worked out. No, 3 governors came out against us, including the current governor, John Hickenlooper at the time. I got phone calls from Black leaders that said, you know, I'm done. I just destroyed my career. Ain't no one ever gonna want to talk to you again, you know, and how are you gonna tell the world you smoke pot? And I'm like, well, I have a Caribbean restaurant. And I went to the University of Colorado. I mean, that's kind of my lineage here, you know, it's what we do. I'm surprised you all were confused. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. But, you know, I mean, so you do this and then the seriousness of what you open the door on becomes real, right? So then you start to see all of the anti things happening, the anti-letting Black people into the industry. Colorado was famous for not allowing anybody that was arrested, had a felony within 10 years of even being an employee in the cannabis space, and no owners in the cannabis space. So we wiped out all of our visionaries for first mover advantage. Why is Colorado so important to Chicago? Because these big MSOs own 80 and 90 and 120 dispensaries here in Colorado. There are 717 dispensaries in Colorado that sold $2 billion worth of cannabis last year. All of that money is now being effectively used to cause issues in Illinois and New York and California, you know, and all of those places. So, you know, as this has unraveled, you start to see the importance of fighting for Black and brown ownership, of fighting for decriminalization. Because I mean, today in X amount of states, you can still be arrested for having a dime bag on you, right? So we are at the beginning of this, not at the end of this, but this has been an 11-year journey.
Thank you so much for not only sharing your journey, but sharing the history and placing it in the context of mass incarceration. So how have you continued to raise the importance of the social justice aspect of this work as you've been engaged in the business of the work?
So once again, you know, I wish I could sit here in front of everybody and say that this was a finely tuned intellectual program that we decided to do 11 years ago to make sure that this all worked out. That's just not the case, right? You know, and especially when you're dealing with an illegal drug, you know, you keep falling into situations, right? And I got to tell you, one of the biggest situations that I have fallen into is Black women. Let's not get this misconstrued. It is Black women in almost every state that have been pushing this social equity agenda for our sons, for our brothers, for our husbands, and now, unfortunately, for our daughters. So when I look around the room, it's been 2 years ago now, good Lord, maybe it was a year ago, maybe it was a year ago. So even a year ago, you know, having the opportunity to meet with the powerful women across the nation that are making this happen, such as the 2 powerful women you have on this panel coming up, Toi Hutchison and Kiana Hughes. You add in, you know, Shalene in Massachusetts, you add in Kat Packer in Los Angeles, Mariska Perez in San Francisco. I mean, and you start to add in all of the women that have, and Black women and brown women that have been fighting for social equity tooth and nail. And this is an ugly fight. Please don't think that, you know, because it's cannabis and it makes us all feel good and we get together and have some great after parties after we did battle. And I mean, the battle is real, the scars are real, the targeting is real, the coming at you is real. So yeah, you know, we lit the torch, but you know, we just ignited, you know, all of those, you know, canisters of gas sitting around the country. So this is this has been an incredible 11 years, and I look forward to the next 11 years.
Absolutely. So you talk about people all over, not just Illinois, not just Colorado, but Massachusetts, California. Uh, what's going to happen? Use your crystal ball. What's going to happen at the federal level relative to cannabis? We know it's allowed to be legalized in states, but will there be federal legislation in the Biden-Harris administration?
So if you go back and you look at all of my interviews, I've been saying now for 11 years, next year we legalize it. Next year we're gonna legalize because we're selling weed. Next year we're gonna legalize. So, you know, I've been wrong and wrong and wrong. This time, I think that within the next 12 to 24 months, we'll see federal legalization happening. But then, you know, last week, the White House fired all of the interns and the staffers that have ever smoked pot, which ironically, I'm assuming that they need to fire Kamala Harris because she admitted to smoking pot. So I find it odd that that is now happening. And then we have people, you know, like President Biden, who, you know, I got a lot of respect for, but he comes from a dinosaur era that has made judgments on people who use cannabis and have decided that cannabis users are this type of a person that's not worthy to be in the White House. When we have seen that, ironically, cannabis smokers consist of Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, JF Kennedy, and George Washington. So I guess in my mind, it's time to reframe who that cannabis consumer is. And women are the fastest growing group of cannabis consumers. So yeah, I think that legalization is around the corner. And once again, it's not because of, well, I guess it is because of the people who are consuming cannabis, but it comes down to money, right? You know, what did your mom tell you all the time? You know, follow the money. With $2 billion being sold in Colorado, California, I don't know, billions upon billions getting ready to be sold. Chicago, once you guys are in full effect, is going to be billions immediately. So how do we have these billions of dollars just floating around in illegal bank accounts or in bank accounts called, you know, Wanda's fine flower arrangements because I can't have a bank account, right? So we have to legalize, A, for the safety of the people who are working in dispensaries, B, for commerce to work with banking, for loans to work, for the SBA to work. And quite frankly, if we're ever going to talk about true social equity, we have to be able to go to a bank and get a low interest loan instead of me having to give away 20% of my company to some white guy because I need $100,000 to buy new lights. So that process has to change, which is why I believe at this point, legalization is happening. And hell, New York just legalized. So with New York and California, that's half the United States. So it's time.
You talked earlier about the judgment that comes with involvement in this industry. And, you know, we can't find any more judgmental folks sometimes than we find in the church and in other parts of our community. How do you, I won't say combat it, but how do you navigate that and get folks to understand that this is so much bigger than quote unquote getting high?
Ooh, it depends on how spicy I'm feeling on the current day when the battle comes in front of me. And there's a number of ways of going about that. One, Black children with epilepsy are not getting access to the idea of being able to use cannabis oil. We treat probably 3,000 to 4,000 children in Colorado that have different forms, severe forms of epilepsy, and we found that cannabis oil is the only thing that helps these kids not have a grand mal seizure. And if you've ever seen a baby have a grand mal seizure, it's horrific. When we look at the idea that people coming back from chemotherapy, the only thing that stops their nausea without destroying their liver is cannabis. When we look at people with anxiety, when we look at vets coming back with PTSD and shrapnel in their body that are saying the only thing that helps me sleep at night and helps me get away from the horrific images of war is cannabis. Those types of things are about what we are focusing on. Let's be real. Weed has been smoked in everybody's household now. It's been smoked in your household. It's been smoked in your household. It's been smoked in your household. So whether it's legal or not is not going to prevent people from smoking weed, whether we can tax it, whether we can study it, whether we can find out what this does for good for our bodies is really what we're talking about right now. And to be honest with you, we're also talking about the financial possibilities of what this plant can do and how it can help to heal, especially after COVID, our community, given the fact that 41% of all Black businesses have failed during last year, not cannabis businesses, all Black businesses. So this is a way to get us back started on the right track again. Oh, and then one last thing. If somebody from the church, so I need to bring up Exodus 33. If you look at Exodus 33, Jesus talks about his holy anointing oil. And in his holy anointing oil are numerous herbs and spices. And one of those herbs happens to be cannabis. And when you look at the idea of putting cannabis oil on lepers, it would probably have worked because it helps with skin conditions. Rubbing it on women who are in labor, yes, that would have helped with all your muscle aches and everything else happening as you're going through labor, helping with your anxiety. So Jesus knew what he was doing, but that's a whole thing for Sunday afternoon.
So that's your Bible study lesson for tomorrow, everyone, or this evening. I can tell that our panelists are chopping at the bit. I'm going to ask you to explain one thing before I introduce them, because I'm excited about hearing from them as well. But you referenced the owners, I've heard them referred to as the oligarchy of the industry, those who go from state to state, essentially purchasing licenses or obtaining licenses. Maybe that was Freudian. Would you help us understand what has happened in the industry in terms of ownership and how we might, and I know that there is a concerted effort to do this differently in Illinois, but how we might navigate around that in Illinois?
How do you navigate around it? I mean, Toi is probably a better person to answer that question, but this is an ongoing issue. And I think the thing that everybody in this industry needs to understand, and here's the heartbreaking answer: one dispensary in its current form is not generational wealth, unless you happen to get lucky and get a mega dispensary. Planet 13 in Las Vegas that sees 5,000 people a day or however many people come through that. Yes, if you own that one dispensary, you're good. You're good. But for the most part, the average dispensary makes about $2 million a year. You are taxed to the hilt on that. So basically and effectively, the only money that most owners of single dispensaries or one or two dispensaries makes is the salary in which they pay themselves. Right. And it's not what you think it is, sadly. These MSOs and these large companies now, and the horse is out of the barn. I don't think that we put it back in. But like I said, when you have organizations that own 80 dispensaries in Colorado, they own, 4 in Illinois. And their lobbyists are already at work in New York and Texas and Florida to ensure that they are clear to control the market. And what does that mean? It means they control the grow facilities, so they control the price of cannabis. It means they control the edible companies and the manufacturing, so they control what products you see on your shelves in each state. Hopefully with legalization, we can start to break in, and that the small owner will have more access to compete with the larger owners. But make no doubt about what is happening. These MSOs are huge, and they are not diverse. And I don't care what any of them are saying. If you look at their C-suite is mostly white and mostly male. If you look at their board of directors are mostly white and mostly male. Their senior management, mostly white or mostly male. But all their bud tenders are Black and brown. They stand up and they're like, well, look at all these jobs we've given everybody. Yeah, no, we're not doing that. So these ladies that you're getting ready to talk to see women such as Toi, controlling the Illinois, the piece, and Kat and Marissa and Shalene and all these women and Kiana talking about what's happening is where the pressure has to stay. But understand, though, that's difficult as well, too, because you get a lot of arrows in your back. Powerful arrows. Green arrow, lots of money attached to
Uh,
them.
I just want for those of us who aren't, and I know what it means, but for those of us who aren't cannabis savvy, what is an MSO? If you
Oh,
would
I'm
just
sorry.
explain that. That's
A
okay.
multi-state organization. So those
Yes.
companies that you were talking about that own, 20 dispensaries and 40 grows and 4 manufacturing facilities in California. Columbia Care that owns, I don't know, I think it's 90 dispensaries in Colorado, and I don't know how many grow facilities, I don't know how many manufacturing facilities. And they do that state by state by state. And you can see that in every single state that has had a competitive nature to get those licenses, it is ironic to me that the same identical companies win every single time, with one black or brown little company that gets picked up. And then as you do your digging, you find out that some MSO was the one that did their application, paid their people, and put that company up in front. So this is happening in every state across the nation all the time.
That is powerful, and so I think that is a great segue into this discussion to bring in um, our two panelists to talk with you about uh, the industry. And before I do that, I just want to provide an introduction to both of them. Toi Hutchison is known as the Illinois Cannabis Czar. But she has been serving this community, this state. She has been serving the public for a long time, in that she proves once more that the road to public service starts in municipal government, because she was once a city clerk, and then served as the state senator for the 40th district, and has, during that entire time, fought on behalf of equity and justice for our people. And I just have to add this, Toi. Not long ago, she and I were fighting on different sides of the border for the third major airport in the Chicago land area. So I'm glad that we are now on the same team, fighting the same fight. Um, I also want to take this opportunity to give an appropriate introduction to Kiana Hughes. While I just met Kiana a few months ago in my role with our compact, I have known of her and known her reputation for a very, very long time, because, in that little city on the other side of the border, we get Illinois news. So I know that Kiana, as the owner of Elevated Education LLC, has over 16 years of curriculum development and 5+ years of cannabis education and advocacy to facilitate cannabis career education classes, write exhibits for cannabis licensing applications, develop curricula for colleges and universities, and most importantly, engage communities of color to educate them on the cannabis plant and industry. She is a founding board member and education director for Chicago NORML, and she created and facilitated cannabis industry training for people from disproportionately impacted communities in and around Chicago. She's currently the deputy director of NORML and has been writing, promoting, advocating for legislation in the state of Illinois and at the federal level. She is a well-respected member of the cannabis community, and we are so happy to welcome both of you to this conversation. And thank you for being here. And so I want to go to first Toi, who was at the Senate at the time, and then ask Kiana to talk about it from the perspective of someone who was pushing the Illinois General Assembly. Would you talk about the journey for cannabis in Illinois?
So yes, hi Karen, hi everybody, happy to be here. I can't tell you how much I love to listen to Wanda. She's my own personal shero, and really one of the first people that I talked to in depth that took the lid off me being able to really talk about both the hypocrisy and the stigma. So we could start to, because it's, and using those words in and of itself is powerful. And Kiana, I tell everybody, I start conversations with like, you don't know what's in a tussin plant. Ain't no such thing as no tussin plant. Like if you know a grandmother would make you take Robitussin for everything, and we trust that, don't know what's in it. Kiana is a powerful public speaker that has been one of the best people I've ever been around to listen to the power of plant-based medicine and all kinds of things in your body and what our communities have been going through. And getting a chance to meet people like this across this journey has been, it's like air for your soul, because there are gale force winds at play here. I mean, there is nothing easy about a cannabis conversation at all, no matter who you're talking to. People come to this viscerally because unfortunately for our communities, there's a whole lot of collective trauma and pain. And so I remember talking about this early on, like when we were first dealing with decriminalizing and we were first dealing with creating a pilot medical program. And we drew the most narrow medical program in the country when we decided to do that in like 2013 or 14. I remember this is in the backdrop of Colorado that had gone in 9. So 13, 14, we're talking about creating a medical pilot, but we had so few ailments that were okay. Like it was interesting to come from Illinois and have everybody think that Illinois is such a progressive blue state, and to really understand the workings and the machinations of 102 counties. 95 of those counties look more like each other than they'll ever look like the greater Chicago metropolitan area. So Illinois could be very, 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 very more purple than people realize when you start looking at statewide policies and trying to navigate that through a legislature. And what we were thinking about at that time was patience. Just that nobody who was sick needed to be in a situation where they were treated like a criminal. They didn't even have the language to talk. I don't remember any language talking about who owned these places, but just that the people who were sick and dying and chronically ill and in pain. And we met, a little girl who had epilepsy came to the gallery. We were talking about, and I remember how non-contentious passing the ability to use cannabis oil in epilepsy for this child was not as controversial as when we got to the point where we were talking about adult use and recreational use. And so we were the first state to attempt to do all of the things at one time, to do the criminal justice things at the same time that we were going to change the face of the industry at the same time that we were going to take the money and reinvest it in communities. The fact that we had 3 pillars where most people, started legalization, as in Colorado, no impact whatsoever on the people it harmed the most. Or after Massachusetts passed by ballot initiative, they drafted a statute that had equity measures in it, and it still took them years to get licenses out the door. So it's like understanding Illinois in context with the country and understanding how incredibly difficult all of these multi-layered things are to break through, and especially to break through it at the same time is it's a fascinating learning experience. And the only thing I can kind of talk about is the through line that I live by, the mantra of like, how do you change the face of the industry? What do you do with the money? And how do you undo the harms? And that if you're talking about cannabis and you're not talking about those 3 things, then you might as well take several seats, because you cannot normalize and legalize an activity for whom the exact same activity destroyed whole communities. And the understanding that it's going to take This is trying to dismantle about 87 years of horrific drug policy that was directed at us. Unraveling, dismantling systems is a thing that requires all hands on deck and pressure points in all kinds of different places to do it. So you have to use the courts, you have to use the legislature, you have to have an administration that's willing to lean in. You have to have all of those pieces, otherwise, in light of the fact that our communities, the story and the history of our communities has always been one of the struggle for incremental change. It's like when I look at the cannabis space and how you can put all of this in one place, like it's criminal justice reform, it's drug policy reform, it's a case study in how you reinvest in communities. But it's not unlike the fact that Congressman Lewis was beaten on that Edmund Pettus Bridge 55 years ago. And we are right now watching a trial for an officer who killed a man in broad daylight. It's not like any of the things that have been killing our communities have gone away. It's that we keep fighting. And for me, in this moment right now, it's like I just know that when you move into position and you have the baton, like I don't know that we're going to get to the place where it's all fixed, and then we get to live our full and productive lives throughout the entire economic stream. I just know that right now we got the baton, and you got to run as far as you can, as hard as you can, for as long as you can, for as many people as you can, until it's time to pass this baton. And so when I look at everything that's happening right now in Illinois, it's like putting the jackhammer in the ground for the first time, which is loud and noisy and messy, and there's rocks and there's debris and it flies all back up in your face. And you cannot be afraid of that, because that's what has to happen to break the ground we need to break. And the fact that we're in Women's History Month and I get to share this panel with people who I adore, especially since this is the hardest work I've ever done in my whole entire life. Turns out birthing an industry is hard, and we're in labor.
Imagine that.
We're in labor, and labor hurts, and contractions are necessary. And the only way I know to get through it is to push. It's the only way I know to get through it, is that we have to push from every single angle we can, because the history of us is not changing anytime soon. So it requires us to not take our eyes off the ball. It requires us to understand that when you take up this work, the gale force winds are hard, and they are strong, and they're designed to knock you off balance, to gaslight, to redirect you, to move you in a different way, when the goal is, how do you change the face of the industry? What do you do with the money? And how do you undo these past harms? Period. Because you have to center the people who have been outright barred from this, as we move to normalization and legalization on this. So the hypocrisy and stigma are real. The efforts of people who do not want to see this happen are real. The hidden hands that move to stir up mess are real. All that stuff is real. But the goal and the fight is necessary. It is worth it. And it's why we're here every single day. You don't get to tell us that we can't participate. And gone are the days where you get to make policy about us without us. So this is the journey here is at the beginning. Like I look at states that are smaller than us, that have thousands more licenses than we do. There's a lot of argument about whether or not we should have had capped licenses here or not. And it's a difficult policy question to ask, because on one hand, you can't let it grow too big too fast, because we know who will suck it all up if you do that. And so we have to prove that we can get these measures in place that work. How we get there is how we're gonna have to get there. But we have to prove that these measures are in place before you can take caps off. Because I've never seen it in any other state where there's no, like, it's unlimited, anybody can get a license and we're the ones who get them. That's not what happens. That is not what happens. So right now, I look at this like, I'm honored. I'm honored to be in the fight. I am honored that we spend so much of our time trying to speak for people who can't speak for themselves, who will never make the newspaper, who nobody's coming to ask what they think about this. but who know that they have a shot, and they know that they have a dream, and they know that they can participate in this. And nobody brands better. Nobody's as creative as we are. No, it ain't cool till we say it's cool. So when we get there, we're going to change this. We are going to change this. But we're going to have to fight every step of the way to get there. And when Wanda says it's been an 11-year journey for her, you know, we weren't the first state to legalize. We were the 11th state to legalize. We were just the first one to try to do all three measures at the same time. Oh, and then there was a pandemic. Then there was this whole 2020 thing. There was that on top of it. But I'm honored every day.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Kiana, so Toi's pushing from the inside. You're pushing from the outside. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, the push from the outside. Well, first of all, let me just, do my due diligence and say thank you for having me here. This is an honor and a privilege. I literally got in the cannabis industry because I thought Wanda was the only Black woman in cannabis and they couldn't find nobody else to interview. And I was like, they need to know me. All right, I'm getting in because she clearly is the only person that exists, but I'm here. And so I'm going to do some stuff too. I've always admired Toi, and they're both just really great mentors and colleagues in this industry that, whose shoulders I've cried on enough times, at least in the past year, certainly. And also to my beautiful cousin, JT. Hey, girl. Anyway, and Hours and Urban League and all of that. So thank you all for having me. I appreciate it. As far as the push from the outside, to be honest, Chicago Normal, we literally started because we were the only Black and brown people that we saw at a lot of cannabis industry events, right? They, each of us kind of got involved coming from a different avenue or from a different way. And, somehow would find ourselves at the, as the only chocolate chips in these very, vanilla functions. And so you kind of see the same people, over and over again, and you come together and you're like, yo, they're not, the way they talk about stuff here, we don't even talk about it like that in our neighborhoods. And at this time, when we got started, there was no money. There was money, but not really for us. There was no real opportunity for licensure or anything. So at that point, we were really just looking to spread the word about the medical program, right? And we just kind of found ourselves in this situation from a very altruistic and real place of wanting to educate our communities and our people and prepare for, if and when it comes, we want to be ready for it, right? And that's really just the spirit of where we started from. So, we were kind of, just kind of up and running and doing our thing for a couple of years and before this conversation was really starting to happen. We started in the Rounder years. And so when we were first approached by, Cassidy and Staines and their group that were drafting the bill, it was from a position of, okay, well, what can we do to have social equity? Social equity was just really starting to become a buzzword at that time. And, it was kind of popping up here and there. A big fight that we kind of had a lot was to separate, like, it's not social justice, it's social equity. It's not social equality, it's social equity. And here's how that's different. But I remember so clearly that getting that first draft of the bill, and it had what is now called the R3, but it used to be called the ROC, right? Restoring Our Communities program. And at that point, that was the social equity program, right? That was what was being proposed for social equity. And we were like, this ain't social equity. What is this? And I had spent 4 months living in Oakland. I went to Oaksterdam University and I volunteered. I spent some time with an organization called the Hood Incubator. And if you know anything about Oakland, their social equity program was, great. You get, great. You get a year of, free rent, and then you're incubated by this other company and so on and so forth. So part of my volunteerism there was just literally calling people that were in these specific zip codes to say, hey, did you know about this? You could get this, you can qualify for this. And so I got to know a little bit more about that program. So then when I saw what was being proposed for us, I'm like, no, this don't even have the right words in it. Like, what is this? Rose, bless her heart, she was just like, well, what do you guys want from me? And so we're like, okay, don't worry about it. We'll give you a plan. And we just literally researched anything social equity-ish from across the country. Anything anybody said they were doing, we were like, okay, put that on the paper. And that plan exists even now to this day. We have it up on our Chicago Normal website as our social equity program, which is kind of like what we have, but not really what we have. But we threw it out there. We're like, listen, this is how hard we need to come, right? This is what's happening all across the country. And if we can't do something like this, we don't even need to do it, because this little stuff that you're talking about now is not it. So there was we had to push the legislators on that end of it, right? And then we had to get buy-in from our communities and from our own people who, talk about the church, child. The church was fighting us. The NAACP was fighting us. We had to fight really hard against just the general mentality and idea that, the white folks ain't gonna let us get none of this weed money, right? And how that's just kind of, and we're still fighting it because they still like, see, I told you the white folks weren't gonna let us get none, but we still
Let's
have
talk
to
about that
keep the
mentality.
momentum going.
Yeah.
Sure.
How do you fight against that? Would you talk about that thinking? Because it's the church. It's some folks who are traditional and who would be allies in this, but then there are some more corporate Black folks, right? Let's talk about the bankers who are very, very nervous. Black bankers. How do you fight against that?
With education and outreach. I mean, and also just choosing your battles wisely, right? I'm not here to change anybody's beliefs, and I can't change what you believe about what God thinks is right and what God thinks isn't right. I think it's wonderful that Wanda just gave us that good word on this Tuesday morning about, Exodus and the cannabis, and that's great. And I even have given some sermons in the past, but I ain't got time for that. Listen, either you at the end of the day, either you gonna be a part of this or you gonna try to stop it. But the train has left the station. And meanwhile, we still getting locked up. There's still weed being sold in your neighborhood, in your church, all up and through, right? Either we gonna know what's in it and how it might affect us. Either we're going to educate ourselves or we're not. And I'm just not the one. I don't have time to be trying to convince people. Honestly, I that's not something. The only way I can fight against that is to educate you. But if you want to believe that, if you're stuck there, and I know just how complicated, religion and all of those different things are, or even when you talk about like the bankers or the corporations or whatever, they're still making that judgment and those observations from a moral or ethical or whatever standpoint. I have found that as legalization, rolls on, people tend to get a little bit more on board. It becomes a lot easier to have these conversations. It's way easier having these conversations now than it was in 2015, 2016, when we were getting started. I would have places that I was trying to just have a presentation at a library just to tell people about the program and about the cannabis program and that they can get on it. And they would be like, I don't think we can have that here. I don't think we can't talk about that here. Oh no, we get state funding. And you're like, but it's legal at the state level, So it is. It's a fight. It's a push. It still is. It's a little bit easier now, but you choose your battles wisely and you preach to the people that want to hear your sermon. And the people that don't want to hear your sermon, they somewhere else preaching somewhere else too. So you just make sure you fight bad information with good information, and also just kind of have I think also it's important to uphold a good, a good reputation, a good, reputation of professionalism and so on, just to combat the stigma and the myths that people have about cannabis users and cannabis sellers.
So we talked about the history of the industry in Illinois. Um, where do you see the future? How do you see this unveiling? And I know that in each, and I'm going to pull you back into this question, Wanda, and ask about the future of the industry just globally. But what role specifically do you see Blacks playing in the industry, and how do you get people up to speed so that they can participate in the way that we believe they should?
Sure. That is a multi-layered parfait or onion. Shout out to Shrek. There's a lot of layers to that. So that is to say, there is, like, we have to be honest about it, right? There is a mentality, there is some psychological, some deep-rooted, deep-seated, things that are going on mentally and emotionally. And so when we talk about, like, ideally, right, the idea is we would be able to take this young man who's been selling dime bags on the street for however many years and then been to jail, but he's good at it, blah, blah, blah. We would be able to take him and somehow get him, up and running and give him a license to run a dispensary, to have and run and do a dispensary. Aside from, business skills or financial barriers to entry or, any of those things, there is also just it's a heavily compliance-ridden thing, right? We don't trust the police. We don't trust the state. We don't want them all in our business. This is the state and the police and all the people all in your business, right? And so, part of the conversation that I was just having last night in one of the classes that I teach is you're going to have to get used to talking to people that you're not used to talking to, right? Even if you get the license right now in Illinois, you're going to need something to sell. And the truth of the matter is, as it stands to get started, you're probably going to be selling one of the, some stuff from the MSOs, right? And you need to build those relationships and you need to so there is a lot that needs to be done to get you from point A to point B, just in terms of what the general public, sees and thinks of as a social equity applicant. And I don't know, I don't necessarily know how we get there other than to just keep, having these kinds of forums, having these real talks and these real conversations, and then also trying to build bridges, so to speak, right, to get them from point A to point B. And also, I think one of the things that we really need to talk about moving forward is, even though we're working on the legislation and we're doing all these things, we're trying to get more and more people in the lottery and then get, more Black and brown ownership and whatever. We need to be creating some type of mechanism or vehicles where we can lend to ourselves, right? Where we are, whether it's crowdfunding, pulling together, everybody want to know, I got $10,000, I got $5,000. I just got my stimulus check. How can I invest in the cannabis industry, right? And the truth of the matter is, Wanda can't do nothing with your $5,000, right? It would be great if we had, a collective pot to put our stuff in to help to prepare for the inevitable failure of some of these businesses. And we got to be realistic about that, because these big boys, these MSOs, they getting it together so they can come in and suck it up like a Hoover vacuum cleaner and get these companies out of there. As soon as they fail, they're going to offer them $3 and they're going to be done, sold their dispensary, right? And sold their legacy. Go ahead, Wanda, you jump in.
So I'm about to crush everybody's dreams out there right now. And I'm really, really sorry about what I'm getting ready to say, right? This is a multi-million-dollar business. If you've got $20,000, you're not in this industry. Simply Pure right now is trying to raise $20 million. We're trying to raise $20 million just to solidify ourselves in Colorado, be able to grow into different, into Massachusetts, California, and some different places. We can't find that money. You want to know why? Let me be realistic with you. We've been at this for 11 years. I'm a business person. My books are tight. I have an entire team of financiers. I've got HR. I mean, I come out of the military. I come out of corporate America. I run a business. My husband and I have been entrepreneurs for 25 years. We can't raise money. And you know why? Because I have to sit in front of 35-year-old white men and ask them for money. A, they don't like the fact that they see interviews like this and I talk out about it. So I'm talking about the very companies that I need to finance me, which is stupid. Because when you think about that for a second, is Coca-Cola going to go to Pepsi and ask Pepsi to give them money so that they can open up in New Orleans? No, they're not. They're not going to work that way, right? And the problem that we're faced with, and I'll be really honest with you, I'm getting ready to call out Black businesses right now. The BE 100, the Black Enterprise 100 needs to step up, and they need to step up now. We no longer have time for Black companies to be like, well, I'm not so sure about, this cannabis space, but they're all invested in Hennessy, and they're invested in Jaguar, and they're invested in, whatever, but they've got some kind of issue though with cannabis. Yep. This is stupid. This is a stupid, stupid, stupid thing for big Black businesses to think about. This industry is on its way. It's happening, and it's happening now. You can't buy 25% of Hennessy. You can't buy 25% of Jaguar, but guess what you can get your hands on? 33% of Simply Pure. So, at some point, we need to wake up and understand and quit asking white people to fund us, because at the end of the day, even if we own 51% of the businesses, which by the way is another stupid thing that we have put into place for social equity, because very few people own 51% of their business. Bill Gates doesn't own 51% of his business. Steve Jobs didn't own 51% of his business. And you tie these hands of these people who are trying to raise money by not allowing them to have the ability to make the deals to be able to grow their business, right? And to have to ask white businesses to fund Black enterprise is stupid. And I don't have any other word for it but stupid, and we need to stop it. And Black businesses need to step up and fund us. Asking these white MSOs to come in, even at the 59 or even at the 49% ownership. So we're taking Black enterprise and saying we're going to own 51%, but then we're going to pull in white money for the other 49%. So basically all we've done is create a program to where white businesses can now get 49% of what is the smidgens that are left out there. And please know, it is smidgens that are left out there already, right? You're only getting a quarter of the pie, if that, and of that quarter, you're giving away 49% of it. So until Black people are ready and brown people are ready to step up and support Black and brown people, guess what? We're all going to be at a complete disadvantage, because we're going to be doing stupid things like asking white companies to make sure that we're whole. That's all I got.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's not all
that's
she
the
has.
truth.
That's not all she has. I don't know why she just said that's all I got. That's not all she has.
Wanda the Dream Crusher, everybody.
I know better. Toi, would you just talk about, because, you're largely responsible for shepherding it on the state side. Where do you see the industry 5 years from now?
Well, one of the things I think we all need to keep in mind is that the industry is not going to look in 5 years the way it looks now. Like it's so volatile. It moves so, the mergers and acquisitions that happen, the people that are buying up stuff all the time, like the way they move around, a multi-state operator moves very differently than someone who's just trying to get into this business. And so we're at this point where I don't believe that there's any point in time where you can take someone who just found out that they got a license and they're on equal footing with someone who's been running a multi-million-dollar operation for 10 years. Like that's just, there's no way to create an equal playing ground on that. So when I think about the ability of us to brand, like create our own products, I'm so excited about the infusion possibilities here in Illinois. We try to create some different on-ramps to get into the business, because I think moving forward, we're going to be in the branding space. That's where I think we're going to be. We are, like I said, nothing moves, nothing changes, nothing in that stuff happens until we say that the imprimatur happens from the Black community on it. And the same thing is going to happen with cannabis. Like this is not a question of whether or not it's going to be legal. So the fact that it's legal now, and people making billions of dollars on this right now. So trying to move us into a place where not only are we figuring out every point Wanda just put down about how to get in the door in the first place. But then changing our focus to how to create the conditions so people can stay in this industry and actually compete. Because that is like, this is a two-pronged thing. It's one thing to get the license. Now you got a license, and you will have people who will flip that license.
Yep.
Like, you know, like, and there's a move afoot to say, well, you can only sell to certain kinds of people. But, you know, like, we need to have an economics conversation. Like, do white people don't have to only sell to certain kinds of people? They get to move through the economic stream in a way that we don't on a typical basis. So when we are thinking about moving, where the industry is going to move forward, I kind of feel like where we are right now is the result of what it was we were studying, debating, and watching states do 4 years ago. And now we're here at this place where we have to try to implement, you know, all the things that we hoped would happen, thought we could put in place to do. We're at that point now. Now we need to be thinking 5 years, 6 years ahead, because that's how quick moving this industry is happening. And it's not even just, I think we're sleeping on hemp. There's so many other, like the fact that we're not talking about this, the entire ecosystem of the cannabis ecosystem, like all of it, all the end uses that are available and legal right now for hemp, and then us trying to move in. I don't think any of these conversations are either or. They're really both and conversations. We got to get people who own, we have to get people who do the ancillary businesses. We have to have people all up and down the chain. Like, the thing that kills me right now is that four multi-state operators right now, they all have vendors. They all have supply chains. They don't need a law to do business with people in the community. I know they're like waiting for us to tell them to do that, but they need HVAC, they need water, they need labeling, they need packaging, they need delivery, you know, like they need all these different things. They all have vendors. And so we just did a diversity report, and again the next couple of days, and it's you know, like when you look at this, 88% white, there's, you know, all the boards in the C-suites, all white and male. And then you start looking at like what the supply chains are. This ecosystem is so big, and we need to be playing at all of it. Like, I almost want to tell people, it's like, wherever you are, you can get in this space. You can get in this space, even if it's not in the licensure level. You can get in this space because the fights are on. It's across the entire ecosystem. I don't know how to say that, you know, and that's the only way that I think that we are going to create the conditions by which Black folks can be in this industry and actually stay and compete. Like, it's not lost on me that there's no neighborhood pharmacies anymore. We get all our prescriptions from Walgreens and CVS. So when people start talking about what's going to happen at the federal level, if we don't take measures to protect all of the things we're trying to fight for on the ground in these states, and this gets swept through without that thoughtful analysis. So like I'm anticipating the MORE Act at the federal level. There's some pieces in there that I want to make sure we don't lose sight of, like previous convictions impeding your ability to have ownership. Or if the banking thing happens without, you know, connecting, like if you've been most impacted by the war on drugs, you probably have some credit issues. So if we're still as unbanked in the cannabis space as we are in the regular space, then we haven't done any equity in the banking space either. This is multi-layered, it's complicated, it's intersectional, and it's done in a way that's supposed to be that, because systems produce what they are designed to produce. And that's why we see what we see as a result of this system. To dismantle this system means you have to do it at every single layer, because that's what the definition of systemic and structural racism is. It's embedded. So once you peel back this, you find another thing. You peel back that, you find another thing. You peel back this, you find another thing. We have to not allow the outside noise to take any of us off the prize, off the game, because believe me, if we don't have a plan for ourselves, they have a plan for us. And if I understand that systems produce what they're designed to produce, then the only way to change what they produce is to dismantle that system. That means at the first sign of trouble, you don't stop. You don't stop. We cannot stop, because it's absolutely asinine to me that there are 39 states with an active, while the federal government is saying there's no medicinal use. There's no medicinal use for this product. We've been running a medical program out of one place, University of Mississippi, one place, one strain. So we're on the precipice of finding out all kinds of stuff, and the federal government is literally like, whoop, we don't see it, we don't hear it, we don't anything. I don't understand it. It's absolutely ridiculous. But if we really are serious about changing this industry, that means We need to come from all sides and all fronts at all times and all ways. We don't use every lever and every tool we can possibly do it. That's what we're trying to do here. That's why it's the fight in Illinois right now. It's so humbling. It's so amazing. It's so amazing. And the reason it's amazing is because it's born of our voices. When you look at it, it's our voices. And they cannot be ignored. It cannot be denied. Our voices. Like, we're not arguing here about whether we should do equity measures. We're arguing here about how much more we can do. While there's 800,000 people being arrested for just having it at the same time. So we need to know who we are and where we are in context so that we don't get burnt out, because this fight is not easy and it's not anywhere near over. It's just beginning. They ain't seen us coming yet. Wait till we really get there. They ain't seen us yet, but we're coming.
So, and that's so important. We've talked a lot about the industry, and all of you are in the industry in some way. Let's talk about, and I think you raised it, Toi, when you were talking about banking. Who are your natural allies outside of the industry, and what allies need to be cultivated in order to address the systemic racism, in order to get our young people to think about this as they think about being doctors and lawyers and all of the other things? How do you create that allyship, and who are your natural allies? And this is for all of you.
I know I have, it's been interesting talking to people who do business in the space and recognize that they're impeded because of the not being able to move across state lines, or because of the way you have to report how your income comes in. So like people who, like Scott's Weed Company, like they sell dirt. They sell dirt, and they're very interested in this banking law. They're very, very, like, those are the main 80, like these multinational companies in the agricultural space, and I'm glad you used the word cultivate. Big agribusiness is an ally to making sure the banking laws are harmonized and changed about this. That is absolutely a thing. I watch, like, Mitch McConnell has a whole tobacco belt ready to turn on a dime for him, and we ain't paying attention to that. Like, this is it's interesting how the allies kind of come out of the woodwork. Some small white operators understand that if we don't get these equity measures out, that's the only thing that keeps their ability to be independent and not sucked up into a multi-state, or a vertically integrated operation in a way that they don't feel is sustainable for themselves, or they just want this little, piece of the pie. But it's very difficult to be up against the behemoth that is multi-state operators that are operating in 7 to 10 states right now, that have a whole phalanx of people to try to get around me. Like, they got all kinds of people trying to figure out how to get around what I say. So, and they know how to do it state by state by state by state by state. So this is I think allies are going to shift and change, but it's going to be very, very clear that when the business is good for them, then all of a sudden people start talking about equity in a slightly different way. If they can see a good business model, like a reason, here's my bottom line. We're not asking anybody to be altruistic. We're not asking you to come in just because it's the right thing to do and it's nice, and that you're going to be nice to some people who are trying to start a business. That is not what this is about. There is a business case to be made for this. There's lots of money to be made around this. Good business is good business. There's a business case for this. I'm not asking, and I don't think anybody that's out there fighting right now to get a license in the state of Illinois is asking people just to do this out the goodness of your heart. And that's, we're not, we want to be in business because we know how to do business. And it's not like they're in this business first movers because they were, as we said back in the day, smarter or gooder than us. There were some structural reasons for why we weren't there. And we're going to dismantle those things whether they like it or not, but it's coming.
Thanks.
World order
It's money.
is
even in delivery coming up right now, delivery and hospitality, one of the areas that I think that a lot of Black and brown people are looking to get into. If you're not thinking about how you are going to have a multi-state delivery company and how that works, getting $5 for everything that you deliver is not generational wealth. So, you know, and the companies now that want to fund, you know, these Black and brown licenses are your MSOs. And what they know is that, yeah, you'll deliver for the next year or two, and then they'll come up to buy you out, and then they'll own it. So there is a piece here that we've got to kind of come to grips with, that, like Toi just says, nobody is buying their OxyContin from the corner pharmacy. You're getting it from Walgreens. You know, we're headed in that direction. I think that cannabis will probably play out a little bit like wine. There'll be the huge winemakers, and then there'll be the smaller ones that may even be able to compete. But make no mistake, even when you're talking about a craft beer or a small winery, it's still Sam Adams. You know, so we're not talking about, you know, $100, you know, a month rent on a little place that puts out 2 cans of beer, right? So, I mean, it's really good questions to have these conversations. And to be honest with you, what is Black industry going to do to be a part of this? Because that's what we need to step up right now. Because let me keep saying this to you, 11 years in this industry, we are so-called making it, and I can't afford to continue going the way that we are continuing to go without a massive infusion of cash to be able to be a much larger organization. So if everybody can figure out how the mom and pops are going to make it, I would be interested to hear that, because I don't see it happening.
Kiana,
I want to
your allies.
Yeah. So I'm going to speak from the advocacy community perspective. So
Sure.
For an organization like a Chicago Normal, who we're fairly new in the game, right? And we've been able to do a lot with very, 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 very little. When Wanda talks about not being able to sustain, you know, at this level without infusion of capital, the same holds true for organizations like a Chicago Normal, right? Because we do what we do for free, basically, but there is a lot of work to be done. And so it is difficult to, and it would be nice to not have to nickel and dime people, right? Because when you're trying to put out education, when you're trying to put out, you know, do outreach and different things of that nature, and especially for who our demographic is, they're not always used to paying for professional development, right? They don't always have that kind of mentality in mind. It's great that we have different things going on with community colleges, and those licenses are going to come out and people are going to be able to go to school. And that's dope that we got, you know, different colleges and universities that are but the people that we really trying to reach, they're not going to be there, right? And they don't necessarily have, you know, the money, even if it's just $150, $100, whatever, you know, to put towards that, right? But we want them to get the information. And so the kind of organizations now that we're looking to be allies with, to be honest, we're looking even outside of the cannabis industry, right? It's time for us to start getting some of that big funding in, because, and it's a struggle for us too, because even though we don't touch the plant, people are still like, but you got marijuana and it's in the name, or, you know what I'm saying? You're still a part of that industry. And how do we, you know, we might not be able to put our money towards that, but that's really what we're looking for. And a lot of people are, you know, everybody wants to make some money. We got that. We're with that. That's it. But if we are to carry out our mission, right, we're going to need funding and support from, you know, from the Black community, right? We're going to need funding and support from the white communities. We need some MacArthur Foundation money, right? Mm-hmm. And the big guys they plan with money, right? And they're able to take their money and put it towards lobbying efforts and things that we would never be able to do. You know, Edie and I, shout out to Edie. I see Edie Moore is in the participant panel. You know, we rolling out to Springfield in our own cars, on our own dimes, you know, trying to, hey, can we talk about this? Can we talk about that? You know, that's the kind of allies that we're looking for at this point, within the community as well as outside of the community, and not having to steady fight the white boys ain't gonna let us get none of that money. Like, okay, but how are we going to prepare ourselves? Like, help us help you, right? Help us prepare the people, to work the harvest, right? Help us do that. But that's just one of the main struggles that we have, and some of the allies that we need to build. And looking outside of anything cannabis related, to just give me some of your white guilt money. I'll take it.
This is why legalization needs to have happened, because we should be able to, and I don't want to keep using Simply Pure, but just because I know it better than any other company out there, but Simply Pure should be able to go to Citibank today and say, we've been in operation for 10 years. We run good books. Right. Here's our profitability. Here's what we need. We want to go buy 4 buildings. We want to expand into whatever. I need a $20 million line of credit. And in any other industry, given what we make and how we do and all the things that we are vocal on, we would have it. Absolutely 100% hands down, at a very small interest rate, as opposed to giving up, 40% of my company, right? I mean, so right. We need legalization to happen for us, but understand with legalization, it also opens the door for those larger organizations, to move in if we don't have more Simply Pures in place. And that's what Kiana is saying, is we need more of us in the pipeline ready, so that when the banks do open, we can go and say, hey, I've got 3 locations, we're in business, we've made $100,000 last year, or whatever that is, so that we can talk business to these banking organizations and the SBA once that veil comes down.
Thank you for that. I'm going to transition us, but I cannot thank all of you enough for allowing me to be a part of a powerful conversation. I've been educated today, and I just want to say that you should consider the Chicago Urban League an ally. And you should also know that I'm encouraging my colleagues throughout the country to consider what role they can play in supporting cannabis in their areas, in their states, in their cities. I'm going to turn this conversation over now to someone who I consider a friend and sister, and we know that's Kiana's cousin, JT Stinnett. She is the Chief Legal Officer and Strategist for ours, and also a serial entrepreneur herself, a graduate of Harvard Law School, and also a graduate of the Next One program. And I hope that folks will stay around until the end, because we are going to have a promotional video about the Next One program that we are relaunching. And one of the target businesses that we are looking at are those who are cannabis adjacent. So JT is going to take the questions that you all have been putting in the chat. I would encourage you to continue to do that, but please welcome JT Stinnett, and she is going to take over from here.
Boy, am I a happy girl to be in this company with such phenomenal, dynamic women. I have been following you, Miss James, since the beginning, on the outside, wondering how I could play. And as Kiana said, my beautiful cousin, you inspired us. Hey, there are other Black girls out here that want to participate. So Toi, I saw you on the Nas special, speaking about the work that you did here in Illinois, and we are forever thankful. There's more work to do. And so what we did with ours is looking to be a multi-state operator. We are wholly African-American owned and mostly women-led. And we went to the Urban League to talk about ways that we could create equity and justice and impact. And there came the compact. And what's been very affirming is in your all's feedback, you've said that there's a need for sessions like this and a fund and a way for us to gather together and create a pathway for minority businesses, not just to participate in the industry, but to thrive. And so our goal is to create a toolkit for that to happen. And we know funding is a huge part of that. I could go on and on, but just want to just do a nod to all of you guys in thanks and gratitude. And I want to start out, we have a question here, and I'm going to put it out to all of the panelists. Is there a known connection strategy between delayed federal legalization and keeping access to capital limited for certain groups?
I do believe that there is nothing that's an accident that happens in this space. And I do believe that there are forces at play that have made it so very difficult to move to be on this legalization march, state by state by state. But the fact that we're doing this state by state by state, like I really thought that once, you know, the population tip would happen. Actually, I really thought that once we had gay marriage, we would have legalization would happen. Like it kind of tracked the same. So I just thought, you know, like once people realize that worried about gay people getting married, we're gonna legalize cannabis at the same time. I just thought it was gonna happen. And so watching this, you know, the majority of the population in this country lives in a place in a jurisdiction where it's legal in some form or another. You know, like I'm still blown away that we're having to do the fights that we're having to do. But then on the other hand, like just my points earlier, I'm not blown away because I'm not naive about who we are in this country and what the history of us is. You know, like we're talking about a product, we're talking about a plant that's been used by indigenous cultures around the world for thousands of years. And nobody bats an eye if I pick up a glass of wine, which has a fatal dosage point. And we all recognize you have cane-based fatal dosage points, pharmaceuticals delivered to your door right now. So it's incredible to me how fast, yet at the same time, how slow this is moving. You know, like, cause that's a weird dichotomy. Like it's speeding ahead. It's becoming more corporate, you know, corporatized every single day. I sat in on I forgot what even the name of the conference was, and they were talking about pet care and beauty products and how the future looks so amazing. And then they got to me and I was like, I did the Wanda thing, like, I'm about to take this down a notch because all ain't right in this world. Like it was, I knew it was akin to like, if we were all there at the same time, I'd have been the only Black person in the thing. And I was like, hold up, while you all are talking about all the, you know, the beauty care industry and the pet care industry and what the indexes are looking like and how investments are going through the roof and how all the financials are looking incredible and the globalization of what's happening. And we're talking to people in Canada and we're talking to people like that. They were so excited. And I'm like, hold on. While we're normalizing and legalizing all the things that you all are so excited about, 800,000 people are arrested for this every single year. So what part of this conference is going to be dedicated to that? Like we gotta speak truth to power everywhere we are, because this is not, this they're not gonna just hand this.
Not an easy fight.
They're not gonna hand it over.
Not an easy fight at all. Thank you so much for that response. Our second question is, where can I find a collective plan, roadmap, something akin to city's master plan? Is there a plan to create one? How can I help?
Yes, there's a plan to create one, because all the women that Wanda mentioned earlier, we got together in Arizona and it was incredible. Like we all felt like superheroes, like feeding off of each other. We were all like, I'm here, you're here, we're here. We could change the world. Like it was, because really the only thing we're held back by is what we can dream up, what we can conceive. That's the only thing that's holding us back right now. But we did start a cannabis regulators of color. There's women from all, like, I think there's 9 of us that started this thing because we recognized that as the regulators from all the legal states were going to come together, that we didn't want equity to you know, we wanted equity to still be centered, and it's centered in all of our work. So how do we talk to each other about best practices? How do we talk to each other about what equity means? How do we educate people around the world as to how equity in the cannabis space is not the same as diversity and inclusion?
No.
Both important topics, but they are not the same. So and especially as people are grabbing onto the word equity, and which can water it down, like really what it is designed to do. So keeping the people that at the forefront, the nexus to, if the war on drugs, what we know about the war on drugs and who it impacted blatantly, and keeping that reality and that truth centered at every single decision, whether it's banking, licensure, supply chains, property, real estate, the environmental conversations that are going to come up, because right now we haven't heard a whole lot about, just the environmental impact of both cannabis and hemp, and indoor versus outdoor grow. Like that equity needs to be centered in every single part of that. I can't wait to see more organizations across the country, especially Black farming organizations, who used to be the number one producers of hemp, and we're pushed out of all of those things. Like, we have a very unique and amazing history tied to this plant. And so it's time to own that history.
It is. And we also need to come down to the business of this. So folks, anybody that's looking at getting into this industry, and I don't care how small you're thinking about or what you're thinking about, you need to have a top-notch finance person tied to your hip. If finance isn't something that comes off of your tongue as, first language and that you understand intently, you need to find somebody who does. You cannot make it in this industry right now if you don't understand warrants, if you don't understand investment policies, if you don't understand how to evaluate give a valuation to your company, if you don't understand that, if you don't understand those things internally and deeply, you have to bring on somebody that does, because at the end of the day, this is business, and it's not small business, it's big business, and you must know it inside and out. No way around it.
Such an excellent point. And I think that brings us back to the Next One program. I'll do a little plug for it. But a huge component of it is going to be focused on recruiting ancillary businesses and cannabis adjacent businesses, but a huge component is finance. I think for any business it's important. I think in cannabis that is so regulated, it's very, very important. And so thank you for that, Jewel. Next question. Have you ever engaged Dr. Claude Anderson, who has great insight into business and politics? Anyone familiar? No.
I'm not.
Okay. We'll table that and do some research on who Dr. Claude Anderson is. And final question. Is it a good idea to start a CBD vending machine during the pandemic? We talked a little bit about hemp, and anybody want to jump in and talk about CBD and a vending machine? Wow.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, Toi, can they do that? Is that a thing? You the regulator, can we do that?
I do know that CBDs are wildly unregulated, and that's a thing that we have to talk about. But I don't ever want to pour water on anybody's dreams about whatever it is they want to, whatever kind of business they want to start. Like, there's a lot of different things you can get in vending machines. So, okay.
You tell us if it's a good idea. I never even thought about it.
Never thought about it. Great question. But as we close, would you all have any thoughts about hemp as a way to maybe, especially when licensing might not be so easy to get access to, using hemp as a gateway or way to get involved in the industry and, towards cannabis? Any thoughts?
Absolutely. I just want to say real quick, because this is something that's fresh on my mind. Elevated Education just developed for Chicago Normal the hemp business crash course, and it really is just an introduction to what is the hemp industry in Illinois. What does that look like? It is it's a viable option, right? The barriers to entry are much lower. The licensing process is much easier. There are still some snags and some different things in there, some hangups within the hemp industry. So I don't want to make the mistake of oversimplifying, what it takes to really do it at that level. But it's absolutely an option. And I do think it's one of those things that, like, even as I started learning more about it, I was like, well, why have we been talking about this cannabis stuff? Like, this almost like it was like, oh, look, over there, there's weed. And then over here, it's like, yeah, but this hemp thing, right? It's cheaper, it's easier, it's whatever. So I think there is some, and yeah, like Lisa Solomon put in the chat, hemp is so much more than CBD. So I'm sick of even hearing the letters CBD. And I would really love for people to do some innovation beyond, even just innovation of thought beyond, CBD. There's rope and there's hempcrete and there's plastics and there's all kinds of stuff. There's all kinds of stuff with hemp. So
the end uses for this,
it's worth it.
Yeah, the end uses for hemp are just it's insane. It is really insane, and in prime for us to be thinking about what that is and be the innovators that we are, that our communities are. Even when you understand, like most of the naval shipping ropes, early on were made out of hemp. Our Declaration of Independence, hemp paper, like in textiles, in I've even seen uses in semiconductors. In Israel, they're building houses out of a mixture called hempcrete, sustainable housing. I mean, like, it is, the end uses are just incredible. And I'm serious when I say Mitch McConnell has the entire tobacco belt in this country ready to turn on a dime for hemp. That's how it got into the 2014 Farming Act. I mean, like, this is, it's really an amazing, when you think about it, it's an amazing moment in time. Like, we're here, we're showing up, we have access to information, politically aware, not worried about taking, truth to power in the streets, in the courts, at legislatures around the country. Like, when we really think about it, for our engagement and participation in the way this industry should be rolled out, this is an amazing moment in time. And one where our voices can't be ignored.
Right, and one to take full advantage of. And we appreciate each one of you all for participating and just sharing all these jewels with us. We have to get on. Again, the feedback has been great in the chat. I'm going to turn it back over to President Freeman Wilson as we're at time, but I just want to thank you all again. Lots of gratitude.
Thank you.
Thank you all. I cannot count the number of times in the chat where people have just said, I got to do something else, but I hate to go. Great panel. And it has been great because of your candor, because of your heart for our people, because of what you're doing. And I just want to thank you on behalf of the Chicago Urban League and on behalf of the folks who have had an opportunity and will have an opportunity to hear you, because not only did we go live on Facebook, but we are going to run this on our YouTube page and on our website and everywhere else. And we're going to close today with the ad for the Next One program, encouraging those folks who want to take their businesses to the next level, who are interested in really ramping up and doing what these ladies have so adeptly talked about, to consider our Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, and to consider our Next One program. And so, Q, please roll the video. And again, thank you. Thank you to JT for your partnership today and for your partnership with the R's and EJC Coalition. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
This program is amazing. They push me to look at Legal Quest from every angle possible, and even those angles that I didn't think were possible.
They were saying, you need to raise the bar, you need to step your game up.
I am so excited to announce that we are bringing back the Next One program. That's the program that is directed towards businesses and their owners who want to take their businesses to the next level, who in fact want to be the next one. We will be able to provide business class training and education. We'll be able to provide mentoring, and we will be able to provide connections and relationships that should allow participants to scale up their businesses in a way that will make them sustainable for generations to come.
The Next One program is for African American firms who've been in existence for at least 5 years, doing $250,000 in annual gross revenue with at least 2 employees, including the business owner. Targeted industries include professional services, food services, technology, and cannabis adjacent businesses.
You know, I have an MBA, so I wasn't necessarily looking for a classic book-based approach to running the business, but what it gave me was a practical education and an understanding of further what it means to be an entrepreneur and the things that I really should be thinking about in trying to work on my business, not being in my business.